So I'm with Marc Bailey, the CEO of the British Business and General Aviation Association. Marc, what is word on the street? How are the members of this community responding to what's happening at the moment?
Good morning, Liz. Well, we've actually been counting a lot of information back from our members, importantly because we see a lot of activity for scheduled airlines and support for what's going on there, and importantly so. I wouldn't want to downtrade what they're up to, but we're starting to suffer in a very similar way from the point of view of our traffic is slowing down. And within a matter of a week, with the borders being closed, we won't be trading. The guys won't be getting revenue through the door, and they'll be faced with exactly the same situation as, can I support my staff? How long can I do that for? Am I going to have to ask people to go on unpaid leave? And all of the same things that we're going to be facing. So with that in mind, one of the things that I have been doing is making sure we've had really close contact with DfT. And we've appraised them of exactly what our situation is. There are things that you don't assume sort of in the background, like maintenance organisations, where they are seeing inputs cancelled, and therefore they're going to be in the same position where they won't have lines of work. Possibly to explain that, when people aren't flying and you're not doing the flying hours, then clearly you don't want to waste the available capacity that you've got for when things fire up. So you don't put your aircraft in for maintenance when you would have done. And the other thing, being really brutal about it, people have got to look after their cash flow. So the last thing they can afford is to pay for maintenance inputs when actually they've just run out of money. So there's all of these things that you've got to share. The one thing I would say that DfT have been supportive. We're no further forward than airlines or many other industries are, in that we've got the package, we've got the links. We'll be sharing that information later again today with our members. But they are taking our inputs a little more seriously from the point of view of, here's the detailed information. We really will need to have something possibly a little bit more than what we've done so far in terms of the loan scheme and everything that's been offered by government. So we are probably slightly behind the curve to those who've shut their operations on the scheduled airlines, but we're heading in the same direction very rapidly.
And obviously, too, you referenced the UK government has announced this emergency measures packages for small business and small businesses. Where do many of the members of the association fall under that? Would you clarify, you think that there could be some help out there available?
I think from the point of view of what's directly available for them at the moment, that the loans that are being offered are there for any business effectively. But you've still got the dilemma of it's not a gift, it's a loan. And therefore all it's doing is pushing back an issue to make sure that you can carry on going. You still have to fund it at some time in the future, and it may help out cash flow in the interim, but the truth is you're still going to be in minus at the end of the year. So how will it help us? Well, no more than any other SME. We're not seeing particular help coming for aviation. I don't think we are different from many of the other small businesses, but it is no different to those other small businesses what we're being offered.
Yeah, it's a hard time, and I think because here in Britain we're just at the beginning of the lockdown, the emergency measures. We're all in a bit of a state of unknown, entering the unknown anyway. Yeah. Please go ahead.
An example. I've been getting contact from MDs of FBOs, and they're seeing different examples. They have examples over in Europe where there is potential help for wages for people that otherwise would have to be laid off. But we're not at that stage in the UK, because people haven't had to think it right the way through to that level of detail. Yet we are behind a curve relative to other countries because we're focusing on the real thing, which is how we stop the virus spreading. And all of this other stuff has to follow afterwards. So there's being a little pragmatic, but not for too long, because we have to do something for everybody. All I can say is DFT are thinking about it. If we share with them the examples that are happening in Europe, given, dare I mention it, and it's disappeared, Brexit, then we do not want to position ourselves to be weaker the other side of this as a consequence. So if our colleagues in Europe are supporting industries, then in truth, we'd be silly not to, would be my position to share with the government. And I'd hope they'd see it the same way.
And that's a very important point that you raise, and I'm glad you did. Thank you. We're all impacted, and as you say, the most important thing is people's personal safety and health, and our loved ones' safety and health. And beyond that, the BBGA has been working very hard for a long time on how we cope with Brexit and the implications of Brexit. Yes. What are you doing? Are you still working on that as we're dealing with this as well? How are you managing those conversations at the board level at the BBGA?
Well, look, thank you for actually bringing that up, because probably with all of this going on, people don't realise that in the background, Brexit negotiations are carrying on virtually. Maybe they're using Zoom as well to have the discussions, but they are carrying on. So it has not stopped. Importantly, we all saw the statement from the Secretary of State that says, we will not be in EASA, the other side of this, after the 31st of December. We didn't talk about single European skies or with the taxation issues or anything like that, but the statement of being outside of EASA in itself can be quite profound. So we've taken the opportunity to discuss with DFT and say, you need to understand the impact that this has on our sector. Some of it will affect aviation in general, but you have to understand what's going on with our sector. They've welcomed us to make a response to them. So we've been working, funny enough, we had a board meeting last week, and we've got a team of people working on creating a paper that is going to be submitted through to our colleagues in DFT to allow them to understand and share with the Brexit negotiation team exactly what it means to us. Now, that doesn't mean that we'll get the result that we want, but the least we can do is say, here's what we think about this item in terms of AOC or access to European skies or the freedoms of the skies and the importance of fifth and above for our community. If we put those things down and say, these are red lines, and we've got the paper, which I hope to submit later on this week to them. We may do that early next week. We want to try and get it right. If we're able to say to them, look, this makes a difference to us, these are our red lines. If you can find a mechanism wherever we sit, either side of the negotiations, then this will make a difference for us. Then I think that's the least that we can try and do.
That is very good news, and underlines the importance of us having industry associations. I also want to ask you, Mark, obviously eBase, understandably the organisers EBAA had to cancel eBase, and MBAA is having to cancel events, ASBAR had to cancel ABase. These shows are a very important source of revenue to keep associations funded and able to do some of the work that you're doing and lobby governments. Have you had any sense of, how that impact is reverberating down yet, or is everybody's just still in shock phase of we've got to do this for everyone's safety, and we're not quite at the point of saying now what yet?
Okay, I think it's going to be quite profound. First of all, I should declare that I have, because you know that BBGA has an agreement with EBAA,
Mm-hmm.
I happen to look after the Council of National Associations for the EBAA team, so all our links to France and Germany and all of that group work together. As a consequence, I sit on the EBAA board. So that's formal. That's not to highlight the fact that I sit on the board, it's to highlight the fact that I can't talk about the financial implications of what cancelling eBase has. So that's just being open about that. If I talk generally about the impact that it'll have, if you think about, I think most organisations won't have any form of insurance to protect them because people will be claiming force majeure or whatever it happens to be in order to step out of any obligations of the insurance. And that's not a pop at the insurers, that's just a statement of where we are. As a consequence, I think that many of the associations that haven't had their events run through already are going to have great big holes in certainly the 2020 budget. And it's going to modify what they're able to do. It then depends on how strong the reserves are in those associations. I would say if I look round at a lot of the UK associations, their reserves are very skimpy. And therefore, they can't take a big hit. So if anyone hasn't had their annual events go through, then I would suggest that there's going to be some really difficult decisions for them to have to take in the coming year. And you said it earlier on, the importance is, and I'm really strong about this, we have to work together as aviation, and the associations have to work together. And we don't want to see any of those associations fail. And we've got to try and take this to a position where we're stronger as associations and come out the other side. Because when Brexit happens, we are going to have a good aviation community in order to push forward all the good stuff for growing our GDP and keeping people coming into the country and investing. So all of that together says it's not going to be easy. We've got to try and find a way through it. I hope that gives some answer, and I didn't go off too much of the tangent there.
That's great. I think it echoes back before we turned the cameras, the recording on. We were talking about how communities are having to come together, and this could be a time, while it's really tough, it could also be a time of greater collaboration, greater community, and new ways of working collaboratively, because we are all, as this situation is showing us, no man, no person, even us in the UK, we are an island, but we're not actually an island in terms of the global community. We are all in it together.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there anything else, Mark, that you would like to highlight now? I'm going to take a couple of snippets of this to put on socials and then put a longer form of the interview on YouTube for...
Yeah, by all means. I think that there's a lot that we've got to try and do, because I think we're all going to be in isolation actually for a period of time. I mean, being practical, we've cancelled our face-to-face meetings, as most people have, and we're working from home. And one of the things that we want to try and do is get an information flow out to members and even non-members for what we're going on, what we're trying to represent. And I think the use of technology like this and getting people comfortable with it this might actually be helpful to accelerate that. So there could be a good byproduct. One of the little side bits that we've got going on is that we're trying to force through the use of an app, the one that we used during our conference, in order to share that, download that with all of the members, so we can have a fast path through for sharing information with people. So in a way, there can be some nice things that could come out of what we've got going on here. Other than that, I think that there are other issues that, you know, when we do settle down, whether we're still able to work in a European context. You may know we obviously have our links with EBAA. We have our associations established already for looking after different aspects called EcoGas, European Council of General Aviation Support, which sits in Europe and works with maintenance and with professional training organisations to try and represent a position into to EASA and to work together. Now, even if we're separated out and we do cut ourselves off from EASA, it's highly likely that we'll encourage government and regulators to mirror what's going on in order to make it easy for us to move our products globally around the world, be it individual components or aircraft. So if you consider we're doing that, it's still going to be important for us to have that voice in Europe and to work together with our European colleagues to stop people diverging. So we've got those things in place and we need to carry on working those. So it's juggling a whole lot of balls at the moment, which is going to keep us occupied. That's all we can say. Even if we're isolated, we're not that isolated.